In 1578, a master builder named Hans van Steenwinckel came to Denmark to help King Frederick II expand the Krogen fort into the Kronborg castle we looked at in a previous video, linked in the description below. But Steenwinckel had only worked on Kronborg for a year when his plans abruptly changed. It was in 1579 or 1580 that he began to work on the mansion and observatory of the Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe. This observatory, called Uraniaborg, was located on the island of Ven, between Denmark and Sweden. Work had reportedly started in 1576. So Steenwinckel was joining the project 3 or 4 years in. The observatory, precisely aligned with the 4 cardinal directions, was really more of a small castle. Brahe set up his observational instruments in its belvederes, the small towers that commanded a large view. But this location at the center of the island of Ven seems to have already been a celestial observatory. On the map, just to the west of Uraniaborg, we can see a circle of stones that were likely aligned to the positions of the stars by much older ancestors. In this image from 1587, we can see that the observatory's bottom level is vaulted with stone pillars. This underground level is reportedly where Brahe had his alchemical laboratory. And this depiction is actually the work of Steenwinckel, one of 3 artists who contributed to this mural. In its royal apartment for the use of King Frederick II and Queen Sophie, Uraniaborg featured a yellow chamber that was octagonal in shape. 4 of the mansion's belvederes were also in the shape of octagons, and each of these octagons featured something quite marvelous: a mechanical automaton, a moving, articulated robot. Several other mechanical statues were housed in the mansion's museum, and were said to have delighted the Queen on her visits there. Every room in Uraniaborg was said to have running water. These waterworks, as well as a fountain at the building's center, were said to be the work of a hydraulics master named Lebenwolf. Queen Sophie, just a short sail away, enjoyed a similar Lebenwolf fountain at Kronborg, where a statue of Neptune rotated on top of a 20-foot column. Hans van Steenwinckel stayed on the island of Ven for 4 or 5 years, during which time he studied with Brahe. In 1584, history tells us that Uraniaborg proved too windy for Brahe's precise observational instruments. So Steenwinckel designed him a newer underground observatory called the Star Castle or Stjerneborg. We can see that here, with just the roofs and turrets peeking through the dirt. On the roof of Stjerneborg's warming room was another automaton statue, this one of Hermes Trismegistus as Mercury. Historian John Robert Christensen sees Uraniaborg as a satellite of Kronborg Castle, calling the combination of the two a site of courtly Renaissance culture comparable to the England of Bacon and Shakespeare under Queen Elizabeth. And it's true, these same flights of fancy were occurring in Queen Elizabeth's court as well. William Gilbert was studying electricity and demonstrating its effects for the Queen. And John Dee, someone also demonstrating magical things at court, had created a wooden beetle that could fly. And at the same time that Uraniborg and its robots were being constructed, between 1575 and 1580, the English writer Philip Sidney was composing a very salacious and innovative novel called Arcadia that described robotic birds. Sidney was a friend to many people in the Elizabethan court, including Francis Bacon, Edmund Spenser, Robert Devereux, and Sidney was also close friends with the Italian cosmologist Giordano Bruno, who seems to have had a small influence on Sidney's imaginative world of Arcadia. Early in the story, Sidney's characters gather at a country lodge. The entire lodge complex is shaped like a comet, and the Yellow Lodge building portrays the color and energy of celestial luminaries. This lodge is built in the shape of a star. Sidney describes a series of artificial inventions in the garden's banqueting house. The robotic singing birds were, quote, made so finely that they did not only deceive the sight with their figure, but the hearing with their songs. These songs were delivered, Sidney tells us, by watery instruments. The author also describes a dining table that was secured to the floor, and along with the people seated there, quote, did all turn round by means of water which ran under and carried it about as a mill. In Arcadia, the robots and rotating table and chairs moved by the power of water, involving the same hydraulic antiquitech that Lebenwolf was tapping for the sites of both Kronborg and Uraniborg. All three seem to be displaying odd forms of technology for the time. But of course, robotics weren't modern for that time, or even new. The Greek mathematician Archytas had created a steam-powered pigeon in 400 BC. So the question then becomes, why hadn't robotics evolved more by the time of the Renaissance than they already had? Why were they sequestered to simply entertain the elites on giant music box gears and playing silly songs? 200 years later, Volkenson would develop a robot that could serve dinner. Why did that require such a long time span to develop? It's as if robots seemed like brand new technology to the people of the Renaissance. Such technology was likely only newly rediscovered, and a pocket of this technology may have been discovered on the mud-flooded island of Ven. This drawing, depicting Uraniborg just 20 years after its completion, shows what looks to be a mud-flooded building that sunk into the ground. The illustration comes from the 1663 atlas put together by Brahe, but it's based on a woodcut of the building from 1598, just 20 years after its completion. Why is this relatively new building sunk into the ground? Its form looks very squatty, like we're only seeing its top half. And there's no cornerstone or demarcation laid for the foundation. The walls simply disappear into the dirt, with doors and windows that look to extend even lower. If Uraniborg was designed to have a basement level, why are these windows and doors cut off? And then, in 1588, just 4 years after Stjerneborg was built, we're told something else that's very odd. That this 4-year-old addition had to be mostly rebuilt. But why? My suspicion is that Stjerneborg was only ever being rebuilt, as it was likely a reclaimed building from a prior liquefaction event that left it almost completely underground. It also seems likely that Steenwinkel was called in only to help Brahe excavate a mud-flooded building, which they dug out as best they could and renamed Uraniborg. Steenwinkel did not design Uraniborg, as he arrived 4 years into the project, and his supposed design of Stjerneborg looks nothing like the other buildings that he did design, including the Gothic Slangerup church. And then, to top it all off, This entire beautiful and expensive complex on the island of Ven was demolished in 1601, just 25 years after it was built. Where have we seen this behavior before? And why demolish such a magical, expensive complex? Whether or not Brahe found it useful as an observatory, Uraniborg was an amazing place in its own right. What knowledge, what technologies were they trying to hide by demolishing it? There's no clear reason given, other than the fact that Christian IV didn't like Tycho Brahe. But Brahe had left Uraniborg 4 years before it was destroyed. Not only that, Brahe was dead at the time it was demolished, in 1601. The story we're given makes no sense, just like the stories we're told regarding our politicians, and our laws, and our money, and our music, and our ancestors, and our robots. I'm grateful for any feedback. Please leave your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching.